So thank you for sitting down with me. To everybody who's watching, I wanted to do an interview with the Filers because I myself have not seen marriage modeled in a way that I want it to. I come from a divorced household, and although my parents have an awesome form of love, it's not what I'm looking for. And you guys have an awesome marriage. You have an extraordinary marriage, and so I figured sitting down with you guys would be an awesome way to learn about some of the intentional things that I can do right now in my season of singleness to set me up for an awesome future. So one of my biggest questions, I think, to start is going to be just the process of love, in falling in love and getting married and dating and all of that just seems to be difficult. I almost treat it like a formula or system sometimes, and I want like a, do this and like you get this, and it's like a cause and effect. And I'm starting to realize that there's really no like guaranteed thing that everybody can do, but there are things that you can do that are beneficial to every relationship. So again, every relationship is kind of unique, but again, there's certain things that you can do that are going to be useful. And so I guess I would love for you guys to start by just telling me a little bit about your story, how you met, what was your season of life, what age were you guys, because I think a lot of people who's 24 or even 23 or 22, they get stressed out about not having met the person that they want to be married to yet, when in reality, I think the average age that people get married is a lot later, and people don't meet till later in life. So right. I don't know what your story is, but I would love to know more about it.
So we met at Wake Forest University, North Carolina, and we met in line for getting the yearbook picture. Cindy was behind me in line, and she was a little bit late because she was babysitting her professor's kid. And
so good way to get good grades.
So I invited her to go in front of me, cool. And we ended up talking. We had some mutual friends.
Okay.
So that was originally how we met. I had seen her from across the cafeteria. I remember vividly in a bright red blouse, and I was like, wow, she's beautiful.
Are you going to tell the real story, or are you going to tell
That's the story I was thinking.
Yeah, so I'll tell the real story. So yes, we did meet then, but we were 18.
So you were younger.
We were younger.
I was a freshman and she was a sophomore, year older.
No, 3 months older, but a year older in school. Okay. But so I cheered at Wake, and
I actually never knew that.
You
That's really cool though.
Yeah, I cheered at Wake, and while I was cheering, we were practicing at that point a 3 high pyramid, which is now you can't do this, right, yeah. And anyway, fell in practice with lots of people watching, and ended up having and fainted, and had a ambulance come and pick me up, and had pins in my ankle and everything else. And so when I went back to Wake, it was like it was November, and it was snowy and that kind of thing. And so Don, who I met in line a couple weeks before, came and brought me a rose with a note on it that said maybe I could help you with your books, because I was in a huge cast. And I thought, wow, I told my roommate he'd be cute if he were a little bit older. And then, so I'm going to keep going with the story. It really won't hit your thing of success in marriage. But so anyway, we started dating. We never stopped dating, and we got married 3.5 years later. So that's kind of our story. And so we dated all through college, and we'll talk more about that. But then we'd been married for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Went back from homecoming. This is after being married. A few
years
later.
And so we just happened to get in a conversation with the guy who had been Don's freshman roommate, who spent a lot of time in college drinking, and he was drunk again at the homecoming event. And he said, "Wow, it's good to see you guys. It's good that one of those dozen roses worked."
That's funny. Wow.
Yeah. So we had gone to a mall and saw there was a special on roses. We bought a dozen roses and split them, and
really
took them
like
to
that was
girls.
true. Wow.
Yeah.
It was
that is really funny. That was 3 years after you've been married. Though.
Yeah,
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, she didn't know the whole time until after. Well, after.
And you hadn't told her. That's so
no.
funny. Wow.
So it's everybody's favorite story, because everybody, when they meet Don, they're like, "Oh my gosh, he's not exactly the player personality," and so it's kind of funny that it would be
That's
done.
too
But
funny.
it's one of our favorite stories.
That is too
It's our
funny.
kids' favorite stories.
No, that's
It's our
amazing.
kids' children's favorite.
Yeah, you gotta
story.
shoot enough shots and maybe one of them will land. With
Yeah.
it. That's too funny.
So here's the question.
There's your
you know,
strategy.
There's your strategy. Yeah, and I would like to say, I'll throw it out there. We were talking about this before you came over. Is that we were both believers in college, but I will say, I've said to a bunch of young ladies that I mentored, I really wish I was the person who was praying for my spouse at that point.
Right.
But Don was in a band, and he was the lead singer in a band, and he was cute. And so I will say that I
I'm learning
picked on
so much
because
about the two of you. I did not know either of those facts. That's amazing.
so he was the cute lead singer in a fraternity band, and I thought he was adorable. And I ended up, we say that God just kind of came through because we were not really seeking godly spouses. I mean, we weren't not seeking godly spouses, but it just wasn't. I think about how far our kids are in advance of that and how they've been praying for specific things, and we've been praying for specific things for them, but we didn't know to do that.
Yeah, I'd say we were believers, but we weren't, still very young. I became a believer in 10th grade through Young Life Ministry.
And me as an 11th grader, and neither of us came from Christian homes.
Okay.
So we hadn't seen any of that.
Right.
So
Well, what about dating in the college environment? Because, and what I've seen is that these are such pivotal and transitional years, and there's so much up and down and life change that can be really hard a lot of times. So, was there something that you would attribute your, success in that to, or was that like a difficult time? Like, what was that like?
The dating in college was not difficult for us. For us, the wonderful thing about it is we got to spend so much time together
Right.
in a great environment. And so I would not say it was difficult. The difficult part came when, we got engaged pretty early. We married my graduation weekend.
Wow.
So
Days before
Cindy
you
had
graduated.
already graduated a year ahead of me
Okay.
and had a real job in another city. But the wedding was in the city in Winston-Salem where Wake Forest is. And so she's out there calling me saying, hey, you got to do this with a florist, you got to do this with a photographer, and I'm stressing out trying to pass the classes that I had procrastinated onto my senior year, and my hair's falling out, and so I was totally stressed out. My fun senior year was like very stressful. So the hard part was when she left.
Interesting.
But I wouldn't say that our college years were difficult. The
No.
summers we were separated because she was in Illinois and I was in North Carolina.
And you made the transition to the married life, and that was fine as well, I guess?
no, that was hard.
Now that part, once getting married, yeah, because we did not know how to fight. We have totally different personalities. I'm much more introverted, Cindy's extroverted.
In fact, on the Myers-Briggs personality profile, there's 4 letters,
Right.
and you can be one of either. We're the exact opposite
You're the exact opposite.
on every letter.
I wonder what, statistically speaking, that would have put your odds at like staying together would be.
I don't
because I'm
know.
pretty sure that's.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's unusual. I haven't met many people that are exactly opposite.
Right.
And those first 4 or 5 years of marriage were very difficult because of that. And we didn't know the things we know now. Now I teach Myers-Briggs to
Right.
young marrieds. And so we do that a lot to say, you need to look at that thing that they do differently you as a strength to you rather than something to fight
a
against.
compliment. Almost.
Right, but just like, not praying for a spouse when we were younger, we just didn't know any better. We just thought, wow, you're just being difficult. But instead, it took us years to figure out. And I think nowadays, that would have been so much easier. It's why we're spending a lot of time with young marrieds these days, because we can kind of really pour into them and teach them some of the
things we
stuff
did
that
wrong.
we didn't
Right.
know right.
So like in conflict, we would, I would take everything, internalize it, and just keep it inside, and then build up over time. And after a while, it'd be like I would just machine gun her and say like, this happened a month ago, and then this and this and this, and she's like, I had no idea I had made you upset. Whereas she wants to talk about it in the moment.
Right.
Because I'm a
So-
verbal processor.
So we had to learn to meet in the middle. I had to learn to talk then, and
Right.
she sometimes would give me a chance to think about. So we've had to learn to.
Well, I think I probably relate to you being a verbal processor. So I feel like I've had similar issues before where I didn't realize that our conflict management styles or just the way we dealt with
Right.
issues was different. And it
Yeah.
is, and I think it's almost important to. I mean, like you said, you got to meet in the middle, but be compromising. And so, do you ever have to just let him internalize things, or like, do you have to let him process it? But, like, I guess who wins out there? Do you talk about it in the moment, or do you let him process it and then you guys talk about it later?
I think we've both gotten a lot better at recognizing what we do and meeting in the middle.
Right, okay.
You know, I mean, again, about a lot of things. I mean, I could go on for a long time about our personalities, but I mean, you know, you have to know yourself to lead yourself. You have to know yourself to know what is it that I do that would make him upset. So when we're in the middle of conflict, instead of it's almost like I kind of want to go ahead and talk about it right away, but I know he needs to think about it a while because he's an internal processor. So I'll be like, can we talk about that tomorrow? So he has some time to process, and so he has some time to think through things. And I think he's more verbal.
And I've learned, and even in scripture, don't let the sun go down in your anger. I learned, okay, I need to talk about this now.
Right.
So I think we've modified to learn how to talk.
Well, and I would imagine that conflict management and dealing with issues is a big thing that you talk to the young married couples about. I mean, if every marriage didn't have the issues, then you wouldn't need, you know, your role at all. So that's probably a large focus of it. But I guess what specifically in that area, or what other areas do you wish that these couples had been thinking about before they got into marriage or ahead of time? Like, I want to go back to even before they got into that relationship. What should they have been thinking about, or how should they have been preparing for that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just having this conversation with one of the kids' friends over the weekend, and I think there's a who you choose is important, but I think how you surround yourself with community and Christian influence as soon as you get married is more important.
Interesting. No, that's cool.
Because Emily asked us, Emily, our daughter who's 22, she asked us, about your friends from college, how many of them are divorced? And we were noticing that about half of our friends from college are divorced,
really?
I would say. And we went to Wake at the time where Wake was a Christian school. And now Wake's a liberal university, but it used to be owned by the Southern Baptist Convention or guided by them. So it's a totally different school. But interestingly enough, we had a young married Sunday school class when we were 27. And that most of those people are still our best friends. And we've had 2 couples probably out of 35 or 40 couples get divorced.
Wow.
And so from that, I think I was telling Emily this morning that I feel like it's a lot about who you surround yourself with. If you're in the Word, if Christianity and your relationship with Jesus is the first thing, that's almost the most important thing.
Then even who you're in the relationship with?
In my opinion, yes.
Well,
because I think God honors a marriage.
Right.
So even if, I think so many people these days take such painstaking worries figuring out who it is,
right,
that they ended up just not getting married.
Right.
Because they're looking for the perfect person, and there's no perfect person. If we would have waited to find somebody who was perfectly perfect,
right,
well, we would have never gotten married.
Yeah.
Biblical community is a big piece of our story because of getting into a group when we were fairly immature, and these people were developing, trying to follow the Bible, and we originally thought they were weird. We thought, okay, they go to the Bible for everything, and we don't.
And they asked us to join their small group, and we would come home at night and go, they're crazy freaks because they're just, they don't do anything without consulting what God says. We're like, that's weird.
But they loved us so incredibly, and so it was just infectious to us. So we spent more and more time with them, and over time we realized, our lives changed.
Right.
And we were closer to each other and closer to Christ and closer to a community. And so throughout our lives, we've really seen small group, biblical community, Acts 2:42 type stuff as it's foundational to who we are.
And that's, that's a really cool point. I wouldn't have thought that was going to be, I obviously realized that it was important, but I wouldn't have thought that was, almost equally as important as the person that you're in the relationship with. And I think that, obviously there's a lot of emphasis on you got to find the right person. And that's why I love Andy Stanley so much, because he preached, I think it's the Love, Sex, and Dating series, where he says, be the person you're looking for is looking for. And he kind of took the emphasis off of finding the right person. And he said, you got to be the right person, but I mean, even that can be hard sometimes because I still think you're always kind of subconsciously evaluating other people or looking. So, I mean, is there, I guess if you are evaluating somebody, are there things you should look for, or is that really just the wrong question altogether?
Well, what we told our kids for years was the thing you look for is that they are running after Jesus harder than you are.
Wow.
I mean, that's all that matters.
Right.
I mean, if you find somebody who is running after Jesus, then you win, right?
Right.
If it's somebody who isn't, then you don't even go down that way.
I feel like things have changed so much in dating from when we were dating to now, and that it seems like there's so much pressure when you go on a date that you're evaluating each other as a marriage partner,
Right.
and it's just crushing weight of pressure on a date. And that was not that way when we were dating at all. And so I don't know, for your generation, I think there's so much. I love the thought of just hanging out in
Right.
community and group dates,
Right.
not so much one-on-one dates, and just getting to know people. And as Cindy said, it's you hang out with people who are following after the Lord and following hard, and that's where you hang out. And over time, the connections will happen,
Right.
the romance will happen.
Right.
Um,
So what would you say is the biggest struggle with our generation then? Obviously you said there's a lot of pressure. Is there something else you'd say like we need to be on the lookout for that we're going to struggle with? Like I know social media puts a lot of pressure on people. That seems to be a net detriment for relationships. Obviously it can create relationships through online dating and stuff, but I really don't think that's necessarily the healthiest way to. I don't know. So was there another sort of generational issue that you'd say we should be on the lookout for? Or?
I just think I just think there are so many pluses to the generation that's there now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think they have so much to offer. I think you've been given so much because you have so much information. Maybe it's too much information. And I don't know what to do about that, but I think they have so many books. Like you've probably read. Matt was reading what did he read? Like 10 books on marriage before he engaged.
Right.
Yeah, I mean all these podcasts, all this information, and I think it created this this place where maybe too much information means you're paralyzed making a decision. And so I don't know how to fix that because I think that's just the generation we live in and there's just a lot of information. But I also think that maybe that's so much that people are like, they're looking for, how do I find the person that's running after Jesus, that's going to be a good spouse, that's going to have the Myers-Briggs that's, I had one group of people, I do Myers-Briggs some at Delta Airlines, and there's two girls that came up to me and they were probably mid-20s and they said, so can you tell us exactly what Myers-Briggs we need to be looking for? They're almost looking like, for a thing. And I was like, okay, you can marry somebody with any Myers-Briggs and it's going to work fine. I mean, and so they're looking for the formula.
Right.
And I don't think there is a formula. I think that you pick to the best of your ability and hope that God opens that particular door to find that particular person.
Right.
But then you just can't wait until all of those things line up that you've read about in relationships for years. Also, I think you have a bad, a wrong taste of what relationships are.
Right.
Because what you see on TV,
Right.
that's just not real.
That makes sense.
I think also it feels like the current generation, they want to take big steps towards relationship, and it's almost like I think it's I don't think this is a generational thing. Self-centeredness is throughout history, right? I think social media can somehow compound a little bit of self-centeredness in the current generation.
Right.
But it's like everyone wants to take these big steps, and I feel like what your generation should do is so focus on the Lord and just be obedient in the little things. Where the Holy Spirit prompts you to do something, you do that little thing. And I think what we've seen in our lives is, when what the Word says, when you're faithful with a small thing, He's going to give you more. And so be faithful in the tiny little acts of obedience, and God can make those big things. And that's where the relationship will end up. But you just don't focus on the big find a wife thing. Focus on what's my small act of obedience today to what the Lord is telling me in my quiet time through the Word.
Right. And then you think that's just a personal, like you're listening for that?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool.
And you're
Exactly.
asking the question if the other person is. I mean,
Right.
those first dates, I mean, we used to tell the kids, those first dates, you need to figure out where they are with Jesus. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't matter what they're going to be because you can navigate that. It doesn't
Right.
matter where you want to live. Although my kids needed to live in Atlanta. I'm kidding. That was a requirement. But, it doesn't matter. All of that stuff you can fix. You
Right.
can't really ever fix unless God just chooses to show up the whole, I don't believe in Jesus
Right.
thing. Or you don't want to get trapped into, well, she's a believer, she's accepted Christ, but, there's something different to being
About
a
making
believer
it
and really running after Jesus. That's
Right.
a totally different deal.
Right.
And so if you want to be that one that wants to do that, you got to find somebody else that does that you would
Mhm.
admire from that perspective.
Well, so I know you were talking earlier about the books and podcasts and everything else. So I love personal development. So I've been through, tons of those books and authors. And I've started on the relationship books. And it's really easy to fall into like the 5 love languages, personality assessments, like, there's lists out there, there's personality type.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so much that it's easy to go, with this, I want this system, I want them to meet these requirements of this criteria. But I think to what you were saying, I've realized that it's so much more about like actually implementing that material and like doing it on a daily basis. So would you say that there are rituals that somebody should do either while they're single or in the beginning stages of dating or I guess in the beginning stages of marriage that would be beneficial to the relationship? Obviously, you said follow those little acts of obedience that the Spirit leads you to, but are there other habits or rituals? I mean, earlier you were talking about starting your fire every morning. That sounds like that's a ritual that you've done together that I would imagine is really good for your marriage and really strengthening. But are there other things like that you'd recommend?
I'd say anything that gets you talking. And so I feel like the big success in our marriage is because, especially when you get into raising kids, is we learned to communicate and be on the same page and being like-minded. And the way you get there is by talking a lot.
Right.
And whether it's, some of the other rituals that we do, like taking walks together. Yeah, and we have our morning coffee together. And when the kids were in those stages where they're playing sports night, we would, get away and go to Chick-fil-A on every Saturday morning and calendar out our week. So it's so much is communication, talk, yeah.
And that was always hard for Don because he's an introvert, so he would not naturally want to talk. But I think he got really good at it. He got so that he enjoyed talking. He enjoyed us communicating,
Absolutely.
or just did it anyway. Not sure
I
which.
enjoy it.
Yeah, but I think all of those things play into it. But I even think when we were dating, it was important for us to. We were not on the same page a couple of times dating, and I don't know. I just think you talk through things, and we were very intentional about the things we did. I mean, we would say, okay, what are we going to do this year to strengthen our marriage? I mean, even this year. I mean, January 1st, we spent with a whiteboard, literally a whiteboard.
That's cool.
Planning out the pieces of our lives and how we were going to intentionally, positively impact them.
Wow.
What do we need to, every year we would always, and every month when the kids were little, what do we need to do to take them from where they are now to where we feel like they need to be? I mean, we even said that about our kids now, and they're 22 and 25. What do we need to do this year for them and their spouses or significant others,
Right.
to help them? What do we need to do with the people around us? What do we need to do? Kind of outwardly focused a little bit more. It's easy to get inwardly focused in those first years of marriage, but I mean, to outwardly focus and say, how are we going to impact the people around us as a team? Because we're now a team.
I love that, the intentional planning. Obviously working for Tommy Newberry, that's a big thing that he does. He does the couples planning retreat, and he has them sit down and go over their goals. And like you said, how are you going to be intentional in each of these areas of life? That's cool.
And we didn't really do it because we knew to do it.
We just did it 'cause
we didn't really get coached that way. It's just more we figured out that things worked better when we intentionally did things.
Right.
And we're a good team. I mean, Cindy has an amazing strategy brain, and I'm an organizer and planner. And so
It's a good team.
we learned that the things that I'm a forward visionary,
Right.
and Don's an in the moment person. We have such different personalities that those strengthened us because Don's very nurturing, and so he was really nurturing with the kids. I have no nurture in me. So, just those things that we originally saw as really negatives because it was like, why are you acting like that? I don't know. Why are you acting like that? Now, then we said, oh my gosh, this is so cool because we get both pieces.
Right.
So when we finally started doing that, we were like, wow, this clicks so well when we're using those opposites. Right. However, I now have plenty of friends that are couples that are exactly the same. And it works great with them too. Right. So I don't
Matt
think...
and Erica have exactly the same Myers-Briggs every letter.
Huh.
And so...
And they're great together.
They're wonderful together.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't think it really matters that way, but I think it matters with what you get and where you are to say, what do we do? What's God... Why did he put us together for this time, and who are we supposed to impact?
So it's almost a mindset of, how are we going to do this together?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's your team. From the minute you get married, you're a team. And so whether that's you're a team and you're trying to raise kids, you're a team and you're trying to do something at your church, you're trying to win some people to Christ, or you're trying to build something, I mean, you're a team. And so how do we, just like you would in a staff, it's how do you look at all the people that you've got there and figure out what their strengths are and how to use those the right way.
Right.
And I think God does that. I mean, I think God creates us together for a reason, and then once we're married, he says, okay, well, you're now better together. So how are you going to go change the world?
Thing, right?
Right.
That's cool. So if communication is big in the beginning stages of the relationship, then is there something that you can do single that you'd recommend? I mean, obviously you were 18 when you met, so that was a long, long time ago. And you said you weren't that intentional ahead of time, but for people like myself who are going, okay, I'm 24, but I'm looking to that next season or next level, what can I do right now? I mean, you mentioned praying earlier and how that was a good thing to do, but are there other, maybe there's not, but, are there any recommendations or piece of advice that you give to somebody who's single and saying, okay, I want to go to the next level, but how can I be intentional with that?
You mean from a development standpoint or from a relationship standpoint?
More from a development standpoint, just because I still believe in that, be the person you're looking for is looking for. So right now I'm focused on how do I make myself, how do I grow? How do I be better? And so, I know that's kind of a big question, kind of a general question, but I don't know if there's something that you'd say, like, you should be doing this every day or every week, or this is something you should be focusing on.
I would say, and this is, I don't want to sound like the the Christian answer, but having a daily quiet time, being in the Word, and not reading it so much, but you've got to read it, but begging God, asking the Lord, what are you trying to say to me through these verses?
Right.
Because the Word of God is living and active as any double-edged sword. What are you trying to say to me? And then journaling. And saying, okay, this is what I feel like the Lord's telling me. You journal it, and then you pray it back to Him. And in doing that, you're building the relationship with Him. You're hearing what He's trying to tell you to do, and then you need to go, if He gives you a prompting, you need to do it. And then you've got it in black and white. And you can go back. Because our minds can't keep track of things, days and days and months. And so I'll go back and review my journal over the last few weeks and say, all right, what is the Lord is saying to me through these days? And usually it's becoming pretty apparent something that I'm supposed to do, right? So I think journaling, hearing from God, acting on the promptings of the Holy Spirit, that's being obedient in those small things that I was talking about earlier. And then He'll take you to that next step.
Well, let me ask it this way. Is there anything that you said to Matt and Emily as they were getting into relationships? Because Matt, isn't Emily dating somebody now?
She is.
And then Matt obviously just got married recently. So is there something, what kind of advice did you give them?
For Matt, we just told him just date somebody. I mean, this was the so he never had a date until he was 20. The summer after he was 23. I mean, never even in high school.
Wow.
He never took a girl out. He always thought he wasn't supposed to date until he found the person he was supposed to marry.
He went on date nights and things like that.
But he
never was interested in a girl.
He was working. He'd graduated from college. He'd gone to Bali for like 3 months and then started working for Chick-fil-A. And he called me in August, like August 6th one day, and he said, "Mom, you won't believe what I'm doing." And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "I'm driving to Athens. I've asked somebody on a date." I was like, "Yeah, funny." And he's like, "No, I have." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh my gosh." And I knew it was significant because
Right.
I would never do that.
Right.
And so anyway, he ended up marrying her. But I think, yeah, for the advice for Matt was just like, okay, you cannot find the perfect person. And he kept saying, "Do you want me to date somebody that I'm not going to marry?" And he said, "I do not feel like I'm supposed to do that." And, Matt has such a strong relationship with the Lord. You just got to go, "Man, you know better for you than I do."
Mhm.
Not that I don't think everybody's
Right.
supposed to date before
Right.
marriage. I mean, that's not what I mean at all.
Right.
Or, I don't believe that. But for Matt, that was the right thing to do. So, I mean, what we told Matt was listen to the Lord because he's going to tell you the deal, right? And I don't think he was actually looking for anybody to marry. I mean, I don't think that was even on his radar screen.
Wow.
I think it came a lot from. I don't feel like there was a specific piece of advice or
Right.
pieces of advice that I gave Matt or Emily as far as dating, but I think their philosophies on dating came a lot out of the investment that Cindy made into Emily and I made into Matt, and like even with Keith Johnson and I did with little Keith and Matt. We had manhood where we would meet in the summers at Cracker Barrel and we're teaching them the definition of manhood from a biblical perspective. And if you ask Matt right now, what's a real man, he can tell you: reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, pursue God's greater reward. And I think that became part of how he viewed life. And so as he looked at dating, he would take himself through those steps. And so I think that was big as far as how he pursued the dating relationship.
It's been a while since I've heard those four put that way. I mean, obviously I grew up hearing Big Keith, my dad, Mr. Chaput saying that kind of stuff. And when you look at that in the context of a relationship, you realize how powerful that would be if you rejected passivity, if you accepted responsibility.
Well, and if you're a woman and you're pursuing somebody or you're being pursued by somebody that has those four things going on, it's very attractive.
Right.
Right? Because those things are incredibly, that's kind of what you want to be looking for.
Right.
And then they also did, Big Keith and Don also did a Bible study. We also, Paige and I laughed because they did one for womanhood. And they did Sarah, Beth, and Emily. And
we wrote the curriculum.
And we were like, "Oh my gosh,
Girls
what are
Bible
you
Study,
going to..."
What's a real woman?
Yeah, we were like, "What are you going to tell them?" Yeah, Paige and I were like, "What?" But it was really cool because I think that half the reason that our kids have been so successful is because Don was present. And so, most moms are present, but to have a really strong father meant that Emily wasn't always chasing guys and never did. So I think that was really, really important. And I will say, somebody asked me the other day, what was the one, and we haven't had an opportunity to say that, but what's the one reason that you feel like your marriage has been successful? And I think our marriage has been successful. And I think it's because I take it back to that there isn't a morning that I can remember that Don doesn't sit right there on that couch, well, there used to be a different chair there, and have a long, quiet time praying for our family.
Wow.
I mean, I can't remember a day that he's not on his knees praying for our family. And my prayer life has come in and out and busy and not busy, being a mom and everything, but I always know that that's the reason that our kids are who they are. It's the reason our marriage has been what it's been, is because he took the time to do that.
Well,
that's the key to the success in a marriage.
Well, I can tell you from the outside looking in, you guys have been absolutely successful. And
Sorry,
I can
I'm
see
crying.
that's
She shouldn't have done that. Why did she have to say it?
Well, it's powerful, and it's cool.
Well, he
to
also
see.
cries at Super Bowl commercials.
That's true.
So.
Well, it's cool to see, and it's fun to be a part of that, and to hear that, and to hear obviously how powerful that is with you to see that. I mean, it speaks to it. It shows me just how important that is to do every day.
It is, because that's also incredibly, I would say I'm fairly type A, fairly independent, fairly strong woman. I have a business. I can do a lot of things on my own. So it's so attractive, even to people like me who are a strong person, to have a husband who is seeking the Lord, who is those four qualities. I mean, that is, So I would say if you're doing anything in the waiting,
Mm.
it's becoming that guy.
Right.
You know, it's becoming that person. And just
Reflecting on those things daily.
yeah, because that's key, because that's the thing that's going to prep you for being great in marriage. You know, that's the stuff that's going to make it all different, because I've had a lot of women be very frustrated in their marriage, and I take it all back to, it's not a personality issue. It's not that they didn't, you know, marry somebody with the right Myers-Briggs. It's not that somebody has an anger problem. It all boils down to, man, I just got very fortunate to have a spouse who thinks that Jesus is the most important thing.
Wow.
And that changed our whole family.
Mm.
It changed how we do everything.
I think as Keith Johnson and I, we're at a Bible study and we were hearing about this biblical manhood, and we realized, oh man, this is really good stuff, and we need to teach it to our sons. We were learning it too, right? So we go out and buy Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis, and I'm reading this going, this is applicable to my life right now, not just teaching my son, but everyday decisions today. It's applicable to my life, and there's hope for someone that is not modeled to, in that you go to God and say, all right, here's your word, and I'm going to try and follow this.
I think guys are always looking for their spouse, but moreover, I think the women are always looking for a husband. You know, I think that's kind of, I don't know if that's just innate in us or whatever, but we were talking the other day how girls always going to want to get married before the guys are ready to. You know, in a relationship, it's just kind of, it's not always, but it seems to be prevalent. And so when Keith and Dom were doing that, Paige and I were like, that is so weird that they're doing womanhood. But then we got to thinking about it, and how cool is it that they're being told what they need to look for in a spouse. And so that's what that Bible study was. It was kind of how to be themselves as a woman, but also to not buy the lie of what the world is saying is important to be as a female. It's just fascinating. But I think that's important, because I think they needed to know. And I mean, our girls are just very fortunate to have their dads, because I think they were always looking for somebody that had those qualities, and Keith and Don are, you know, those kind of guys.
So one of my last questions will be, I'm big on identity and people, and what you believe about yourself, you usually act out, and what you hold to be true about you want to, like, you manifest in your life. And so a lot of times I feel like we get our identity from past experiences, from things that happen, from things people tell us. Were there any limiting beliefs that you guys had to overcome specifically, and or how would you recommend rewriting the story? Like, for me, I come from a divorced household, so it would be easy for me to say, get caught up in that limiting belief, and to let that, to carry that into my marriage, and say, and let that almost create a barrier or an obstacle that really doesn't exist. And so, was there anything that you guys had to overcome, and or would you have any big recommendations for how to overcome things like that?
I'll go personally. Personally, my you don't mean as a couple, you mean individually.
I mean, it could be either. I mean,
I think, well, it kind of flows over to that. So I grew up in a household where education was really important. My dad was a physics professor, and my mom was an educator, and my sister ended up being an educator originally. And so education was really important, and success and achievement were celebrated, which isn't bad. But I think I bought the lie to some extent that achievement was the most important thing. And so it took me years to get over that and realize that following God is the most important thing, and achievement isn't as important. Fast forward to when we had kids and I had to make a decision to stay home. And if you think achievement and education, and I was always, I was kind of climbing the corporate ladder. I had a really bright future ahead of me. And at that exact moment, the Lord said, no, I would like for you to stay home with Matt. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I have no reason to want to do that. I love my job. That's what daycare's for. And it was very clear in a series of 3 events that happened in a very short period of time that the Lord was laying something out and saying, no, you need to stay home. And so I quit my job.
Can I just
Yeah, go
interject
ahead.
for a second? That was a big lesson in surrender for me. When we were going through this period and she's pregnant with Matt, I really wanted her to stay home. And it wasn't that there was, I just felt like everyone was supposed to stay home. I just really wanted her to stay with our kids. But Cindy is an incredible business person. And as she said, had a very bright future on the corporate ladder. So she was climbing rapidly. But whenever I would say, I want you to stay home, we would fight. So, a lot of conflict over that in that discussion. But so I went, after a while, and we fought every time, I went to the Lord and said, all right, I quit. I give up. I'm not going to try and talk her into it anymore. This is, Lord, if you want her to stay home with this kid, it's you. It's not me. So totally stepped back, totally surrendered. And in that surrender, got to sit back and watch God take her through a series of steps that she was just describing.
Right.
And I did nothing, 0. And then all of a sudden she comes home and says, I'm supposed to stay home. So I just wanted to, you said, is there anything you had to overcome? I think that was a big thing for me because I wanted to try and force her, and that was total wrong approach.
Right.
And I think, why don't I learn that lesson all through my life of surrender?
Right.
Lord, I'm giving it to you, and then getting to see him do the miracle.
That's cool.
Sorry, I interrupted
No,
you.
it's
No,
okay.
that's
So I
awesome.
ended up staying home, and literally the day that Don went back to work after Matt was born, I was like, this is a terrible idea. I mean, I cried when and I don't cry at all. And I cried when he went to work, and I would cry when he came home, and I would hand him the Matt was just a pain.
the truth.
It's a good thing he's cool now, because he was not cool then. So I would hand him the baby, and I would be like, I hate this. Because remember, I told you earlier I was not a nurturer, and Don is the nurturer. And so I would hand him the baby, and I would go to Starbucks or anywhere I could get away from Matt for a little while. And I hated it. And it took me a year to figure out that the reason the Lord had asked me to do that, for many reasons, but it was because he wanted me to figure out that achievement and success and climbing the corporate ladder was not success.
Right.
That success was being obedient. And he had called me to that, and that was what I was supposed to do. Again, momhood was not easy for me in those early years, but through it all, I said stupid stuff like, before I left, whoever stayed home with kids probably wasn't smart enough to have a job. I made statements like that. So, fast forward, I own a company now just to help people who want to work part-time. So, and then he gave us that company too, which was just crazy. And so, I think we go back to your question on what was the thing that was kind of something was a limiting factor. And I think it was that the world tells women, I don't know if they tell men too, but I'll just go with the women thing, that success is about education and climbing the corporate ladder and getting the bells and whistles and all of that stuff. And I had to lay all of that down, and it was the best decision I ever made.
Wow.
My kids
That's cool,
crossed
man.
the stage at graduation, and I thought I didn't miss it. And at the same point, he gave me this cool company I got to run 10 hours a week while they were in school to help other people who wanted to stay home. So, how could I have been a CEO of a company and get to be home for every minute and not miss tennis team and, basketball mom and all those kind of things we did. And I got to be at everything. And I think I got to be at the place that I got to be at. And anyway, I was at Delta Airlines, and that's when I felt like, we were 27, and that's when I quit Delta. And I remember leaving Delta that day and thinking, I can't believe I have to give this up. And the Lord, in his kindness, said, if you're obedient, I'll give it back. And so about 2 years ago, through a series of odd events, I still run a company, but I had an opportunity that they asked me to come back to Delta
Wow.
to do some work, and it's just crazy. And as I got my badge on that first day and I walked back into the offices, and for some reason in their grace and kindness, I've been able to kind of sit and make great, I mean, with all of the people that are executive level people, I get to work
That's so cool.
a couple of days a week. And when I got that badge and I looked at it, hadn't thought about that promise for a long period of time. It was busy, and all of a sudden I sat there looking at the badge and I thought of that promise that, you know, you give this up for me and I'll give it back to you.
That's cool.
And it's been cool being back thinking, oh my gosh, it's still corporate America. Yes, it's been fun to be back at Delta, but
Right.
I wouldn't have traded the time at home for anything
Right.
with that. But
And
anyway,
God brought it full circle.
and God brought it full circle. So anyway,
so
it's
cool.
been a journey, but I mean, there's hard stuff along the way, but stuff like that we had to work through. I mean, when I decided to stay home with kids and we decided I would stay home, we had just built a house, which we sold because we couldn't afford it. We sold 2 of our cars,
Wow.
and we started to tithe in the same week, in the same month. And so we went from, and Don had gone to grad school, so he was making less income than I was. So we lost 2/3 of our income in 1 week and started tithing. And so, and you're like, okay,
Wow.
God, you said to put this on the line, so here it is.
It's on the line. It's out there. What are you gonna
Mhm.
That's amazing, though. What a testament of faith and just, like you said, surrender. I'm just saying here.
And eating a
God
lot
is
of
good.
beans and rice because we didn't have any money.
I love that though.
Yeah.
I think it's, and I love that you guys went through that period of time because I feel like that adds to the strength of it so much. And that's something that's been big for me is finding somebody where money isn't a factor, isn't a driving, isn't a motivator. And I think that, like you said, success is often viewed as this, you know, you get all the bells and whistles, you get the house and everything else. And it's easy to get caught in pursuing somebody who can give you that kind of lifestyle or whatever it may be. And so it's cool to hear that, you know, you guys had it and then you gave it away and, you know, you still were a team, you know, throughout that whole period of time. So I love
Yeah,
hearing
and
that.
it goes back to that faithful with a little. I mean, throughout our lives, I mean, we've really tried to listen. You know, if God said do this, really tried to do that
Mm.
because in some of it, like that seemed weird. It's like I have this great job at Delta and I'm making 2/3 of the income. And if you look at the world's way of making decisions, that's not very
Yeah,
smart.
you wouldn't have done that. Yeah.
You wouldn't have done that. That's
Right.
not very smart. You would have had him stay home.
Right.
But, and I'm not saying that guys shouldn't
Right.
stay home, and I'm not saying, again, I'm never saying that every woman should stay home with their kids. I'm just saying we were given, I was told to stay home, and so that's my obedience.
Right.
You know, I made a mistake at some point down the road, 3 or 4 years after that, thinking that that meant that every woman was supposed to stay home, and I was like telling all of my friends they were supposed to stay home, and I feel like I was quickly disciplined that that was not that wasn't my banner. I was not supposed to be doing that.
Right.
I was just supposed to help anybody who wanted to.
Right.
But there is an option.
Well, to wrap it up, is there anything else, anything else you guys would like to talk about or speak to just while we have another second here? Again, it could be anything. Maybe it's just something that's helped you guys along the way, something you'd recommend for singles or for young couples, or maybe it's a mindset thing. I don't know. I could run back through some of the questions I sent you guys, or we could really just.
Nothing comes
Again-
to my mind immediately. If you want to run through the questions,
Yeah,
that's fine.
go ahead.
I'll look through and make sure there's nothing I missed. Last question. Am I overthinking all of this by doing an interview with 2 people who have an extraordinary marriage?
But no, you're not. I mean, I love the questions. I love that, and just compliments to you two, and that you're seeking. You know, getting wise counsel. As Cindy said, so many times in our experience, we got into situations with decisions with each other or with kids that plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. So I think you're doing exactly the right thing.
It's good to hear.
Yeah,
The other-
but I would say, I mean, I'm going to go with your overthinking question.
Yes.
I do think you can play devil's advocate with yourself long enough that you'll never marry anybody.
Right.
Oh,
I do think so.
Right.
I mean, I'm not, I just think don't be looking for perfection because don't be looking for a list that you check off.
Right.
Because if we would have done that, I mean, I don't think we've ever gotten married.
yeah.
So I don't know that I would do that.
The thing I would say is about Christian counseling. I think sometimes there's a stigma around that you don't go to Christian counseling unless you have major issues. I would encourage any single or married go to Christian counseling.
Yeah, we have not done it, but we have had a lot of friends go through it, and it's been really good for them.
And even our senior pastor recently spoke to our young marrieds, and he told all of you guys should go to Christian counseling. I think especially when there's emotional baggage, and as prevalent as divorce and broken relationships are these days, I think there's a lot of benefit to going to Christian counseling.
And I guess just a thought came to mind, and I feel like I obviously know the answer here, but John Gottman talks about how if you want to have a successful marriage, if you want to have an awesome marriage, you got to marry your best friend. So is that something you guys would say, your best friends? And is that would you agree with that? Is that, a good piece of advice to hang on to? Or?
Yeah, we have.
Absolutely.
We always laugh because we have very different interests. So Don loves to play golf and I don't, and Don surfs and I cook and I love.
And that works great.
And it works great.
Yeah, it works great.
But we do have something in common is that we love to travel.
Okay.
And Don works for Delta, so we get to travel for free, and we have for 30 years. So I think that's our common thing that we love, and we've developed that together. I mean, we were odd because we grew up together because we were 18. We were children when we got married, when we got into our relationship, and so we really got to grow old together. Don kind of wanted to go to grad school before we got married, and what did I say?
You said, then we won't grow up together. Pretty much. That was pretty much her gist was, I was like, I wanted to go ahead and make money and feel like, I had already established myself before I
provided
gave
for
her
us
the
and all that
ring.
kind
And
of
so
stuff.
she was kind of pushing, let's get married. And I was like, no. And she's like, then we won't, then we'll kind of establish ourselves as singles and then we won't grow up together.
Right.
And that was her argument to go ahead. And so she was.
Of course, we've been married. We've been dating 3.5 years, so it's time.
Well, it's good to hear that because, I kind of deemed 2019 my year of transformation, and I wanted to take a year off of dating, mostly because of that same reason. Well, I wanted to establish myself and grow a lot and just be financially more secure before I got into a relationship. But I'm almost realizing that the right relationship, that really isn't necessarily a barrier. It's not something that's I should be considering. So it's good to hear that that's that it worked
She was
out
right.
for you. Yeah, right.
Every once in a while. But I do think that, again, you got to keep it the most important thing that you're becoming the person, again, like Andy Stoneley says, that you want to be, and becoming the guy that, like a Don and a Keith Johnson are. I mean, we're just the most fortunate women to be married to them. And so be them. And then not look for somebody who checks all the boxes. Because it seems like a lot of the people that people marry, if you ask them the question, would they have checked all the boxes? The answer is no. But they just didn't know to check the boxes. The problem is y'all do.
Right.
And so, sometimes God brings somebody in your path that you think, I don't know that this one's it. And you just got to keep asking the question and you'll know.
And it's been fascinating because I've dated several girls at this point. Some that I was like, this is the one. Others that I thought checked all the boxes. And I kind of realized that maybe I don't have the right boxes. It was like maybe they did check all of my boxes, but those boxes aren't really what I need or what, would be good for me or what God, has planned for me. So it was kind of a wake-up call just recently of like, oh, wow. Again, maybe I've been looking at it through the wrong lens. I've had the wrong perspective this whole time. So
Yeah, because we were looking for somebody that, let's say, had the same similar interests to us.
right.
We wouldn't have gotten married.
Yeah, I traveled all over the world, or all over the country and some of the world when we got married. And Don had been to 2
traveled.
states.
Wow.
Right. And
That's
so,
amazing.
and so would travel have been something? No,
Right.
it wouldn't have
It
been.
wouldn't have,
So there wouldn't have been anything that, so
Right.
if having common interests were the same thing, we wouldn't have gotten married.
Interesting.
Um,
Very cool. Well, thank you both so much for sitting down with me. I genuinely
for asking.
appreciate it. It really means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to Nick as well. Just to have the opportunity to hear and learn from somebody who's experienced something that I know we both want to experience. So I appreciate it.
Glad to do.
Glad to. I think it's fun.